Oh! The fragment entered here, and then went all the way down here, making this lovely staircase, and actually did exit the other side. Oh my god, the game has turned into a slideshow. Before we get started with this video, just be aware that today I have had a truly atrocious day. In fact, the last few days have been utterly dreadful, with 3 videos being recorded and then scrapped because I just absolutely hated them, along with a few health issues on my part and things with the apartment going really badly. It's been a pretty bad time, so this video isn't anything particularly serious. I've already had a little bit of rum, it's currently 3 AM, I want to destroy things, I want a cathartic experience, and the best way to do that, I think, is with oversized missiles, finally using our space, port, base, whatever you want to call it, the thing in space, for its design purpose, blowing things up using missiles. So what we have currently, of course, is our starbase, still not completed just yet, but certainly operational for our testing today, and what we have is this, a very, very large, in fact huge missile, going down the entire spine of the craft. So this thing is what we're going to be testing with. I believe it's set to our 3rd AI, which currently has no name, and right now it has this, the cluster controller, along with loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of cluster extensions. This thing can hold lots of missiles within itself. So that's what we're going to be testing out first. How effective is it going to be if we just drop this thing onto a target? Essentially just dropping potentially 1,000-ish missiles onto another target. I think regardless, it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's prep some tester missiles and see the basics first. Let's drop some little mines with magnets and explosives. Well, probably fragments, because explosives will detonate each other, and that's just no fun because lack of damage. Don't worry, eventually we will just pack this thing full of explosives as well. First up, we have these. Just nice and simple, we just have the cluster ejector, frag warheads, and the magnet. First of all, I just wanted to see how resistant such a huge missile is to anti-missile defenses. Yeah, you're not breaking it. It's also absorbed, I think, at least 200 of these interceptors now. Yep. Okay. Now for a proper test. Yep, that is a lot of missiles. Well, technically mines, I suppose, but you get the point. It'll take a second for all the magnets to kick in. And then, whoa, they're just going to throw themselves at the target. Absolutely shredding the outside. That will make anything with very vulnerable sections, this will probably find it. But overall, not that effective. Gotta be honest, that's the biggest problem I've had with the cluster missiles. Super fun, but they've never really struck me as something which breaks the game in comparison to just regular medium efficient missiles. So let's see if we can do something about that. But first, I want to do that test one more time, this time actually seeing the missiles deploy and having more of them actually hit the target. So this first one is a pretty standard one. This is just the frag missiles, or well, the frag mines in this case, and this is a pretty standard way to use the cluster missiles because it's using all the extra health and everything of the main missile itself to get close enough to deliver all of these small missiles. Again, in this case, mines. With a lot of lag, there they are, all being released. A bit too close, really, but as you can see, lots of them there. And then the magnets kick in, absolutely shredding the underside of the craft and just dealing damage all over. The problem with these, I tend to find, is they're a little bit underwhelming for the extreme cost of the weapon and how much space they take up. But they certainly get the job done, and they look very, very fun. But hopefully today, we're going to find some stupid versions which do a little bit better. Okay, here goes our first silly idea. So this is a missile. In fact, I'll explain it very quickly. This is a missile stuck to a harpoon, stuck to our main craft. The point of this is that one of the big advantages to cluster missiles is that you can fire them and have most of the missiles fairly safe. All of that payload is inside of the craft, so you'd only have to have one exit point. So, what if you wanted to use normal missiles? Well, here's an idea. It's a silly one. But if this works, I think it might, which is going to be completely broken, by the way. This might actually be really, really powerful. So there it goes, throwing missiles from its storage. And because they're staggered, this time we can use regular explosive, which, as you can see, is actually pretty okay. This means you could potentially have the missile get really close to the enemy before releasing the missiles as well, which could overwhelm defenses and ultimately cause all sorts of problems as the enemy tries to deal with the large missile, which has way too much health. And something has just happened, and I think, yeah, this is bugged. This is definitely bugged. That is way too many missiles. How are you still firing? In fact, I can hear how it's still firing. I think it's taking from my storage. Well, that's not meant to happen, so I have just found a bug, and it's a pretty fun one. So it turns out by doing this, you can fire unlimited missiles from its storage, because it's not actually taking from its storage, it's taking from the storage inside of your craft instead. Yeah, I could actually see some uses for this with the bug. I could see some uses without the bug, but with the bug, definitely. And there it is. Oh no, it stopped firing now. Oh, is it because it actually ran out of missiles? I don't think it did, but that was definitely too many missiles. Well, I'm going to do that test again, but I'm going to fire the weapon slightly slower and see what happens then. I'm just resetting now because it occurs to me it could have simply been the lifetime. The lifetime could have passed, meaning that it was no longer able to fire because it was about to self-destruct. It should have still been firing even if the enemy was classed as 2 damage. That will not stop a cluster missile like that from firing away. It will continue to fire until the missile itself is depleted. I made sure to do a quick test before this just to make sure that was the case. So, I've been firing for a while, this time against an immortal crossbones. And it seems to be continuing on, though I will allow it to continue for a while longer. As you can see in the top right, we have done way more damage than in the original test. So to me, this shows that lifespan could have been the problem, but it isn't. Okay. So then it shows the problem was not the enemy being destroyed and not the lifespan. So what is causing it to eventually stop firing? And by the way, I have now completely proven that it is firing missiles from storage, not from its own internal storage, because these missiles are also 3 times the size of the mines, and it's firing more of them than the mines. So that definitely doesn't work. Is there a way to make it so it never runs out? That is the question. This will be the final test I'm going to do. I've also tested in the background now the amount of time to release the winch. That didn't do anything to it, so now I'm just firing at half the speed. Let's see if we end up firing more missiles. I'm simply timing it. I'm also looking at the damage being done in the top right, though that's not a particularly accurate way of doing this, because the explosions can hit different areas and then more damage is technically done, and it can be all weird. Okay, going off the timing and everything else, it didn't seem to really do much more. It did do more damage, though it looked like more of the missiles were actually hitting as well. Once again, it's not exactly a very accurate thing. I think it may be something to do with how many missiles it actually takes, because it didn't seem to be taking the missiles in a very uniform way, so perhaps once the missiles have reloaded back to the original point, that causes it to stop. But the point is, it fires way more missiles than it should, and this is a very silly way of doing things. The thing which actually made me think of this is that some of the Grey Talon crafts, at very least some of the Grey Talons, perhaps Steel Striders, have a very similar mechanism, but rather than using it for a weapon, they'll have flares and everything on the end here, so missiles will not even go anywhere near the main craft, but will instead try and take out the missile with the flares. And then that way they don't have to keep on firing flares over and over and over again. So, on to my next idea, throwing rocks at the target. So this is the idea. Reinforced bodies, cluster ejector, and we have the missile itself have some speed to it. The speed is then transferred to these, and you're then essentially firing rocks at the enemy. It will release them nice and close, then hopefully do a cluster of damage where all of those rocks are being released. That's the idea. Don't think this will really work all that well, to be perfectly honest, but I do have other ideas afterwards. For instance, what we could do is have something similar to this, but instead have the thruster, not the torpedo, there we are. The thruster, then no fins, a little bit of fuel, and then the reinforced body, so it is releasing rocket-propelled rocks. Yes, at this point, I do completely forget that the thumperheads are a thing. It's because normally if you have a thumperhead, you then need to add, if I go over here, the controls, which is like the remote guidance and everything else. But since I'm not going to need that for these, I should have used the thumperhead. I completely forgot. It doesn't make too much of a difference, really. It increases their speed and damage by a little bit, but mostly their speed. I will use the thumperhead in at least one test though later on, because right now I'm recording this hours after recording that last bit of footage. And I'm way more drunk now. Hopefully that made sense. So the missile is released. After 10 seconds, the thruster will turn on. At this point, it's no longer in space. Maybe it should turn a little bit earlier then, but that's fine. And then when it's within 90 meters of the target, it will release the rockets. Well, at this point, the rocks. Oh, okay, so it needs a little bit more fuel, but not really. I don't really think this is going to do enough, by the way. Just putting it out there, I think this is a completely silly idea, but it's going to be glorious nonetheless. Wow, that does go everywhere. So that was the impact of the large missile, which actually did a lot considering it wasn't really made for that. Wow, that is kind of terrifying to look at. And there we are. Maybe if it was released a little bit later so it could all hit one area. I'm just trying to think of the advantages of having loads of little impacts rather than one large impact. It means it would guarantee go through things. I've also noticed that thumper damage can be stopped quite easily depending on how armor is built. At least that's how it used to work. I mean, I haven't really tested them out in a very long time. Maybe I'm just talking absolute gibberish here, which wouldn't exactly be anything unusual for me. So this time they were released at 40 meters away from the target. So a far more condensed cluster. I mean, it got through several layers, but the damage was still fairly minimal. I think it's because they're not moving fast enough and they're not worth enough damage each without really stacking it up. This time, only this many missiles missed. One more try, then I'll start being a bit more silly with them. Okay, that's pretty much the last second I could release them. The missile itself is already hit. Yeah, just not enough damage. At least I more missed because of the angle. I've also added more missiles to make sure we've been firing with the maximum amount each time, and we have. So sadly that doesn't really work. So next, let's give them their own rocket propulsion. This may break the game, by the way, because that's going to be a lot of calculations the game's going to have to make very quickly. Also, as a side note, maybe that would work better if you were using a smaller missile that can go faster. That's the fastest I can get that missile to go. This time I'm releasing them at about 60 meters as well, because I feel like they need a little bit of time to get that speed from their own thrusters. Please don't actually break the game. It would be lovely if you didn't. Oh my god, the game has turned into a slideshow. Oh, that is horrendous. Okay, yep. Wow. About the same, and quite a few of them missed anyway. So, there goes my dream of that. Again, maybe a faster missile, maybe different sizes of the thumpers, but for an utter swarm, it doesn't seem all that effective, honestly. I mean, a few went all the way through, which is nice. But yeah, I'll give it one more try. Let's see if we can hit perhaps in the core of the enemy so more of them are hitting. Also releasing them a little bit earlier again this time, because looking back at the video, it's hard to tell, but it didn't seem like they quite reached their own max speed. Oh, well, there's the lag, as would be expected. Lovely bit of a slideshow there. Oh, some of them bouncing off the target. Yeah, most of them hit that time at pretty much full speed. This isn't really viable. And I really want to focus on the smallest missiles, because that's what I find the most fun when it comes to the cluster missiles. It's more visually weird. I just wanted to have at least one hitting the core. How about against something more heavily armored? Let's see if it has any purpose there. Okay, I can safely say this is not a viable missile type. Very, very little damage there. On the upside, though, it did showcase one of the other benefits to the cluster missiles I've mentioned before. It's just so resistant to anti-munition defense, or anti-missile defense in this case, because the main missile itself has a lot of health. So if you do want specific smaller missiles to definitely reach the target, a cluster is viable. The problem is you sacrifice a lot of damage and everything else by using clusters because the main missile itself needs to have the cluster controller and extensions, and then the smaller missiles will need to have the ejectors, which are all non-functioning blocks as soon as it actually hits the target, because they're just nothing. They don't have health or explosives or speed. They're just there to make sure it works. Non-functioning blocks. Non-functioning components. I've been playing Minecraft earlier. So this is the next idea. This is the rods from God, the kinetic bombardment, the idea of just firing down a rod of metal, I believe it was tungsten, the original concept in the Cold War, at a target, doing severe kinetic damage and being pretty much immortal in terms of anti-missile defenses, because this thing isn't going to be frail or fragile in any way. It's pure health. This thing has over 2 million health and 20 armor. It's going to be incredibly difficult to kill. Now, sadly, the max speed is still pretty slow, but because of how many reinforced bodies it has an impact damage per meter per second of 23,000. Meaning if this hits at full speed, it's gonna really hurt. It's gonna be 23.7 thousand times 143. It's a lot. It is an insanely high amount of damage. But as I've said before, I don't normally trust thump damage because it can be stopped if the armor is built correctly. So let's just see if this even works. Fire away. I've added one more fuel. It's going to start burning a little bit earlier as well, so it will be reaching its maximum speed before hitting the target, and the jet should still be on after it hits. Here's hoping we hit the body and not a turret, because I would like to see just a huge crater being formed here. So we're going to hit the back of the craft. We are definitely hitting a turret, and it literally destroyed every single block on the turret. That's really weird to see. So next time what I'm hoping to see is it hit something like this, because then it will transfer all of that damage throughout everything. Also, I'm getting tired and a little bit tipsy now, and talking is becoming more and more difficult. But this has been so much fun. So, since apparently I forgot that thumperheads exist, which increase kinetic damage and everything else, here is a hit with a thumperhead with the larger missile. Do apologise for that. As you can see, it's still pretty darn devastating, and that was lots and lots of stacked armor. It is pretty fantastic. But not as much a difference as you would imagine the thumperhead actually adding. The main thing it does is increase the speed of the missile, which obviously does increase the damage, but yeah, it wouldn't have changed the results of the tests. Just, I do remember they exist later. So this is the benefit for the satellite though, because we don't have to travel that far, we can just front load everything. Doesn't need anywhere near as much fuel, and every reinforced body adds to its health, which adds to its impact damage. Oh, I think it's gonna hit a turret again. I do love the fact they just vanish. Though this is showcasing what I was talking about with the damage not being propagated forever, because it destroyed the block, which was the actual turret block, the source block, that is no longer connected to anything, so the damage vanishes. For instance, if we hit something really small, like a very small turret, like let's say this one, so much damage is being wasted. Whereas an explosive or a fragment will continue past the turret as long as the turret is destroyed. This just pretty much guarantees the destruction of whatever it hits. Please hit the hull this time. It's also an argument just for smaller missiles for this purpose, perhaps medium or just regular large missiles, but I want a fun, huge missile. Ah, I think it's gonna hit a turret again. Yep. Oh! Now that is what I wanted to see. It even got to work, removing some of the heavy armored core. Actually, that is one question. What is the thumper damage armor penetration value? Does it say? Only 15. Yeah, so against heavy armor, it might struggle a little bit, but still, that just opened up the hull. Look at that. It's gone all the way along to here. Remember, this isn't wood. This is just metal painted. So all of that was removed. It removed all this side here. It's removed all these different rooms. In fact, it's removed a lot of heavy armor and exposed the mainframe. Okay, so the rods from God might be a viable thing from the depths. If you don't mind missiles wasting a lot of damage if they hit the wrong target. At least the wrong part of the target. I need to fire this against the crossbones, which has far less health per block. Yeah, there we go. Loads of damage wasted there since it did hit a turret. Well, that is really fun. But remember, today we're testing out the huge missiles, the new missiles. I can test out Thump later, at some other point. Maybe. After we've dealt with this and tested this on a crossbones, another thing I want to test out is the heat missiles. That is, of course, the high explosive anti-tank missiles. Because they should be able to do a lot of internal damage. Though I've had kind of mixed results with heat missiles in the past, I think just stacking it up this much is going to be interesting to say the least. Let's see if we can completely gut the innards of a target. This time, please don't hit a turret. That'd be lovely. How did you hit that tiny turret when you have all of this to hit? You're choosing a random block each time and you really hate their turrets. Look at that! Oh, that is so beautiful. Okay, yeah, let's test it out versus something with much less heavy armor and such a lot of lighter armor, something like the crossbones. Of course, the problem is the crossbones does actually have a heavy armor core. Let's hope we avoid that at least. Please don't hit this. Just hit the hull, I beg you. How do you keep doing this? There's nothing in your AI which makes you target anything. It's all randomed. Randomized. Randomed. The funny thing is, though, with smaller missiles, you definitely want to hit the turrets, since it's such a dedicated amount of damage, not split on the hull. Well, you had a bit of superstructure there. Okay. So, yeah, that is pretty darn lovely. It's got down to the metal, it's carved a lot of it out, it's completely removed all that section, but as you can imagine, smaller missiles hitting a turret will still do enough damage to completely obliterate them, and because the damage isn't being spread to anything but the turret, that dedicated damage would be deadly. So, our first missile of the day, which is actually feasible and useful in the future. Nice. Next up then, heat missiles. Then there's very little really to showcase other than just the usual stuff of just regular explosives. So, how do we do this then? There we are, the shaped head charge. Yeah, which will do heat damage. And then, well, you don't even have to actually add high explosives behind it, but the more you add, the more damage it will do. I think it all automatically goes into the heat damage, am I correct? Whoa. Yeah, that's a little bit insane, actually. Now, these will be dispersed by any kind of space armor. We don't really want to hit any air with this, it will stop them, but if we can hit something solid, I can imagine this being pretty deadly. Yeah. Wait, this is damage done by each fragment. So 341,000 damage per fragment. There's 90 fragments with a really high metric there. Okay. Then just the regular high explosive damage. Is there a way to transfer more? We can make it go further into the target, but that will sacrifice how many fragments we have and the damage of them. So I think to begin with, let's just go with maximum amount of them and see what happens. Then later on, we can test it out and see what works better, what works worse. So the thing is with heat, at least in From the Depths, is that it all depends on the target you're hitting. If they have loads of air spaces and are protected against it properly, it's not going to be anywhere near as effective, so the target makes a huge difference. And honestly, the Bulwark should be pretty good against this because a lot of space inside the Bulwark is just empty. Yeah, loads of just random air spaces, then you have pockets like this everywhere. it could potentially be a huge problem. Okay, gonna have to pause a lot for this because I want to see what happens with the fragment. How did you miss? Oh, yeah, I forgot because of the front of the craft. Yeah, because the front of the craft, it no longer has the normal detection. Let's try that again. The first hit really didn't hit very well. It span near the end. And, well, you can actually see the fragments at least. Wow, they sheared off quite a lot, actually. So it hit here, went forwards, it went through... Wait, it went through all of that? Okay, despite the fact that's such a terrible angle, it still managed to penetrate through all of that, including a few air spaces. I am keen to see what happens when it hits directly next time. So I got a little bit bored firing at the bulwark. Here is the anvil, one of the other godly designs from the Onyx Watch. Actually, the bulwark isn't even godly anymore. By the way, this is. And there we go, lots of lag, and you can see the fragments have already spawned. It'll be difficult to see exactly what's going on, but let's see if they exit the other side. Oh, wow, it's like a shotgun. Yep, and they are still going, which means they could have done more damage. And they just completely carved through that. Okay, need to find a larger target. Because that was just damage wasted, honestly. There we are, hitting the Megalodon. So it landed there, and it's gone all the way through, taking out weapons and armor and pretty much everything. It stopped in a few places because of, I think, air pockets. But yeah, you can see the devastation there. It's gone all the way through there, and is actually causing it to sink to the side. So it's clearly done something very important. Perhaps a piece of AI, perhaps a PID, who knows. It's also completely exposed this. I'm actually surprised that did not completely die there. Oh, like one little extra bit of damage, and this would have simply stopped existing. It also survived the Megalodon's anti-missile capabilities, which aren't light, by the way. It has munition lasers, it has the turret over here for protection. I'm stumbling over my words more and more, so let's just do a few more tests, just with frag and high explosive. You know, actually, let's fire once more, because now it's going to be showing off its underbelly. Let's see what happens if you hit from underneath, perhaps by using a torpedo. Obviously, we're not actually using a torpedo, but we can pretend. Well, not the perfect spot to hit, but should go all the way through anyway. Dink! Yep, there we are. All the way through, destroying everything. Once again, the turret was untouched. What is with that? Maybe air pockets around them, but wow, yeah, so it's completely gone through there. It's destroyed this system anyway, their own large missile system. Maybe I should have upped the penetration factor, because at the moment it's for pure damage. Yeah, that would have definitely worked. It would have gone through and actually damaged these, rather than just siphoning off a little bit of their external armor. Well, I think I've proven the worth of them, and in fact, I'm going to leave this thing here, as I change to high explosive and then fragment. So, just regular high explosive. Almost 1 million damage, and it's cleared out. Wow. Oh, look at the perfect explosion it's made, though. That perfect bit of damage. Once again, turrets just survive. Then there's two types of fragment I want to test out. The first of which is going to be using the frag warheads, of course, but what we're going to be doing is changing the cone angle to maximum. So this increases the damage per fragment, though of course the actual frags are going to go everywhere. So I kind of want to see what happens when we have them like that, hitting a pretty flat surface. Obviously these would be better if they hit inside of a exploded area already, or for instance exploded inside of the enemy craft. But I kind of want to see what happens on the outside. After that, I will narrow them so that the angle is far lower, the damage is far lower, but they're all going to hit something a lot more important. Actually, let's start off with that then. Okay, not quite as 1, let's say 30. So we're halving the starting angle. Let's just do this and just copy that, that'll be easier. Here's the 30-degree fragments. I'm hoping it doesn't hit the explosive area, but let's find out. Yep, perfect next to it. I have really high hopes for this, to be perfectly honest. Whoa! Whoa. 1.35 million damage, and it's just gone right through. Yeah, because although they are doing less damage per fragment, bear in mind how large this missile is. The fragments were still doing an insane amount of damage, and yet that's just carved through. Nice and reliable, and probably the type of missile I would use with this size of missile, to be perfectly honest. It's just boring, though. So here we go with the 180 degree fragments. These are doing truly insane levels of damage per fragment. The armor penetration value, by the way, is only 4 per fragment, which is pretty terrible, but still. Sheer overwhelming damage. Oh, I really wish that one hit inside. But let's see what happens per fragment. Okay, so as you can see, obviously a lot's going to miss, but imagine if that exploded inside of the craft. Yeah. Let's follow this fragment here. Whoa. I mean, they didn't go all the way through the craft, but they certainly tried. They certainly tried. Yeah, that is devastating. Wow, okay, so this fragment here, the fragment entered here, and then went all the way down here, making this lovely staircase, and actually did exit the other side. In fact, several of them did. They penetrated the entire craft. If that exploded inside, it would have just eradicated absolutely everything. So, that is pretty much all I wanted to test, just with the huge missiles. I honestly don't think I am going to be using the huge missiles on a normal basis. They're just too expensive, and if one goes off wrong or something, it's such a waste of materials. I still prefer the medium missiles over pretty much all the others, just because of sheer consistency. But they are a lot of fun, as you can well imagine. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. This was just me doing a little bit of testing, and honestly, it was completely self-indulgent. I just wanted to fire missiles at things, and I did, and I achieved that goal. So if you have enjoyed today's video, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. And tell me, do you like these videos when I'm completely off the cuff, just doing something stupid and not really progressing anything, just because I am doing this in my spare time anyway? Or is it just something I should keep to myself? Tell me in the comments. Have a lovely day. Do take care. I exploded early. And until next time, goodbye. I swear these turrets are immortal.